What began as a normal live discussion quickly escalated into a shocking confrontation when Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, exposed Chelsea Clinton in front of millions. With calm precision, Traoré unveiled startling details about an alleged $82 million scandal, leaving Chelsea visibly unsettled. The studio grew silent as the weight of his words sank in, and her carefully constructed reputation started to collapse in front of everyone. This unforgettable moment went viral instantly, igniting outrage, debates, and international headlines. The studio lights shone brightly, reflecting off polished floors as the cameras kept rolling. Millions around the world tuned in for what was expected to be a calm conversation about global development. Chelsea Clinton sat comfortably in her chair, smiling with practiced confidence. Across from her sat Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, wearing his usual composed expression. At first, the dialogue moved smoothly. Questions about aid, education, and global partnerships. The audience clapped politely at Chelsea's polished replies. But there was something unusual in Traoré's eyes that evening. He wasn't there just to talk. He carried a burden, a truth that needed to be voiced. With quiet determination, he leaned forward. His tone was steady, but it cut through the studio like a blade. "Before we continue, I must speak the truth," he said. Instantly, the atmosphere changed. Conversation stopped. Chelsea's smile wavered. The audience sensed that something unsettling was about to happen. This was not an ordinary debate. It was about to shake the very ground beneath everyone watching. And in that moment of silence, millions leaned closer to their screens, waiting to witness history. Chelsea blinked, uncertain if she had misheard. The moderator shifted uneasily in his seat. Traoré's voice remained calm, but his words carried an unexpected weight. "For too long, the world has heard only one side of the story," he began. "But today, I will reveal what has been hidden." Gasps rippled through the audience. Chelsea adjusted her posture, her hands gripping the armrest tightly. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion on her face. Traoré did not rush. He spoke carefully, as if every word had been rehearsed in his heart for years. $82 million, he said softly yet firmly. The figure lingered in the air like thunder. Money that was meant for children, for schools, for hope, lost under a name the world trusts. Chelsea's eyes widened. The studio went silent. Some in the audience covered their mouths in disbelief. The moderator tried to interrupt, but his voice shook. Traoré gently raised his hand, signaling he was not finished. In that silence, the world realized this was no ordinary exchange. It was a revelation that could not be dismissed. Chelsea forced a fragile smile, but her eyes betrayed her. She tried to let off, as though Traoré's words were political theater, but no one in the room was laughing. He pressed on, his voice unwavering. $82 million. Funds promised for development. Funds that vanished. And still, families in my country wait for clean water, for medicine, for dignity. A murmur swept through the crowd. The studio lights felt hotter, harsher. Chelsea shifted uncomfortably, her carefully built confidence slipping. That's not accurate," she stammered. "These are baseless accusations." Her tone cracked, exposing her nerves. Traoré did not raise his voice. He did not shout or accuse. Instead, he looked directly into the camera, addressing the millions watching. "This is not about politics. This is about truth, about children who sleep hungry while wealth is hidden away." Tears welled up in the eyes of some in the audience. For the first time, Chelsea appeared shaken, not with anger, but with the weight of what was being revealed. The clash had begun, and the world would never forget it. The audience in the studio could feel it. Something heavy lingered in the air. Every sound, every movement seemed sharper than usual. People shifted in their seats, whispering nervously. Chelsea tried to keep her composure, but her voice wavered as she said, "These are dangerous lies. President Traoré, you are misleading people." But her words fell flat. The camera stayed focused on Traoré's calm face. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his tone. Instead, he leaned closer to the microphone and said quietly, "I do not mislead. I bring the voices of mothers in villages where promises were never fulfilled. I have seen children drink from polluted rivers while $82 million disappeared into thin air." Gasps filled the room. The moderator lowered his gaze, unsure of what to say. The truth was too heavy, too sharp. The silence became unbearable. For the first time, Chelsea's usual aura of confidence dimmed, and viewers across the world could feel it. Something inside her was breaking. While the studio remained frozen, millions online began reacting instantly. Social media feeds erupted with clips of Traoré's words. Headlines spread rapidly across screens. Traoré exposes the $82 million scandal. Chelsea Clinton under fire. The president of Burkina Faso shocks the world. In cafes across Africa, people stopped sipping their tea and leaned toward TV screens. In homes throughout America, families raised the volume. In Europe, late-night viewers refreshed their phones with wide eyes. Everywhere, people whispered the same question. Is this real? In Burkina Faso, ordinary citizens gathered in the streets, cheering for their leader. For them, it was not just about money. It was about dignity. Their president had dared to say what many were afraid to voice. Back in the studio, Chelsea's breathing grew heavier. She realized this was no longer just a discussion. The world was listening. Her name, her image, her legacy were being questioned questioned in real time. The weight of millions of eyes pressed down on her shoulders, and although the room was filled with bright lights, she suddenly felt entirely exposed. Chelsea's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. The cameras captured it. That brief moment of weakness spread across social media within seconds. She tried to return to her script, fumbling with her notes. "We have always supported health and education programs," she insisted, forcing a smile. "Our records are clear," but her voice cracked. The words no longer carried the power they once held. Traoré didn't rush to interrupt. He let the silence stretch, giving her space to finish. When she did, he looked at her with eyes that reflected the pain of thousands. "Madam Clinton," he said softly, "you can defend reports and numbers on paper, but tell me, how does paper comfort a mother who buries her child because the promised medicine never came?" The studio froze. The audience swallowed hard. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Chelsea lowered her gaze. For the first time in her public life, her carefully built defenses seemed to shatter, and everyone watching knew the night was far from over. A sudden shuffle broke the silence. From a slim folder at his side, Traoré pulled out several documents and placed them on the table. The papers slid forward under the studio lights, the ink bold and undeniable. The cameras zoomed in. Viewers at home could see signatures, bank records, and dates. The text wasn't entirely legible, but the seriousness was clear. "These are not rumors," Traoré said softly. "These are trails, transfers, accounts, evidence of what was promised and what disappeared." Chelsea froze. Her fingers twitched as though she wanted to seize the papers but didn't dare. The moderator leaned forward, stunned. The audience whispered, some gasping audibly. Traoré did not gloat. He did not smile. He simply allowed the weight of truth to sit on the table between them. Chelsea's throat tightened. She looked at the papers, then at the millions of unseen eyes watching through the cameras. For the first time, she had no line prepared. The silence was louder than thunder, and the world felt it. This was not merely a debate. This was history unfolding live. Chelsea finally spoke, her voice frail, trembling. This isn't fair. These documents can be twisted, misunderstood." She stopped herself. The words sounded weaker than she intended. Traoré's gaze remained steady. He was not cruel. He was not attacking. His tone carried sorrow, not anger. "Fair? What is fair for the father who buries his daughter because medicine was lost in someone's pockets?" The words cut through the air. The audience's eyes filled with tears. Some shook their heads, whispering prayers under their breath. Chelsea's armor, built over decades of careful appearances, was cracking in front of everyone. Her hands clutched the chair so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Meanwhile, phones around the globe buzzed nonstop. Hashtags surged to the top of social media. People demanded answers. Videos replayed endlessly. In Ouagadougou, crowds gathered around giant public screens, chanting Traoré's name, their voices rising with pride. Their leader was unafraid. He was carrying their pain to the world stage. Yet in the studio, Chelsea sat trembling, trapped between the papers on the table and the millions of eyes watching her unravel. The moderator tried to step in, but his voice cracked under the pressure. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and finally admitted, This is very serious." Chelsea's eyes darted across the room, searching for sympathy, but what she saw shocked her. In the front row, a young woman in the audience had tears streaming down her face. She was quietly sobbing, her hands covering her eyes. Then another, then another. Soon the cameras captured the scene. Grown men and women in the audience were wiping their faces, not out of anger, but out of heartbreak. Traoré turned slightly, acknowledging the tears. His voice softened, almost like a father speaking to his children. "This is not about humiliation. It is about dignity. When money disappears, it is not just numbers. It is lives. Lives cut short." Chelsea swallowed hard. For the first time, she seemed smaller than the chair she occupied. The studio was no longer just a stage. It had become a courtroom of conscience. And with each passing second, the world realized that this confrontation was greater than politics. It was about humanity itself. From the back of the studio, a small voice suddenly pierced the silence. It was a child, no older than 10, sitting beside her mother. "Mama, why are they crying?" she asked softly. The words struck the room like lightning. Cameras swung toward the sound. The mother pulled her daughter close, but the moment had already shifted the air. The innocence of the child's question lingered painfully. Traoré heard it too. He turned slightly toward the girl, his eyes softening. "Because truth makes people cry, my child," he said gently. "But tears can also wash away lies." The audience broke into sobs. Even the cameraman struggled to keep steady. Chelsea lowered her gaze, her lips trembling, her silence deafening. Outside the studio, news crews captured live reactions. Some viewers clutched their chests. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The scandal was no longer just about figures. It was about human hearts breaking under betrayal. And now, even a child had unknowingly voiced the question echoing in millions of homes. How could this happen? As the tension deepened, a producer signaled for a live call. The line connected, and a woman's trembling voice filled the studio. She introduced herself as Mariam, calling from Burkina Faso. "My son died because the medicine never reached our hospital," she said, her words drenched in grief. "We were told the funds were coming. We believed, but he is gone. He was only 7. The studio fell silent again. Chelsea's face turned pale. Tears streamed down the cheeks of audience members. Some openly sobbed. Traoré bowed his head, his voice voice heavy with sorrow. Mariam, your pain is why I speak tonight. Your son's life matters, and the world must know what has been stolen from you. The line went quiet as Mariam wept. Millions watching across the globe felt the weight of her pain as if it were their own. Chelsea shifted uncomfortably, unable to face the cameras. She seemed smaller, almost invisible against the raw voices of the very people her family had once claimed to serve. And still, Traoré stood tall, not with anger, but with dignity. By now, Chelsea's posture had collapsed. Her back hunched, her eyes darted nervously, and her lips quivered as though words were trapped in her throat. The lights that once celebrated her presence now felt like harsh spotlights, exposing every weakness. Traoré placed his hand gently over the papers once more. His tone was firm, yet compassionate. This is not the end of you, Chelsea, but it may be the beginning of truth. Sometimes the fall of pride is the rise of justice. The audience, stunned, broke into scattered applause, not for humiliation, but for courage, for the rare sight of a leader speaking for the voiceless with quiet strength. Chelsea buried her face briefly in her hands, unable to hold back tears any longer. For decades, she had been shielded by polished speeches and family influence. But tonight, those shields shattered. The cameras captured her breaking down in real time. The clip would replay endlessly, the moment Chelsea Clinton's legacy cracked under the quiet truth of an African leader. And though the scandal was still unfolding, one thing was certain: the world would never see her the same way again. By dawn the next morning, everything had changed. Every major news outlet carried the confrontation as their leading story. Splashed across screens were headlines like "Traoré's Truth Shakes the Clintons" and 82 million questions demand answers. Clips of the moment looped online without pause. In Africa, young people filled social media with messages of pride. "Our leader speaks for us." In the United States, debates raged across television panels and dinner tables. Some defended Chelsea fiercely, while others demanded investigations. Outside her residence in New York, cameras crowded the streets. Journalists shouted questions she could not answer. Her polished image was unraveling faster than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, villagers danced in celebration. At last, their pain was seen, their struggles spoken on the world stage. Elderly women wept with gratitude, saying, "This boy speaks like our ancestors. He is fearless." The scandal had grown into more than. It had become a global storm, and at its center stood a calm young president, carrying both the pride of his people and the heavy truth of injustice. That evening, Chelsea sat in a private meeting room, surrounded by advisors. The polished walls and expensive furniture could not hide the tension. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "You must act quickly," one advisor pressed. "Deny everything. Call it false information." Another voice interrupted, firmer. "No. If you deny it, the documents Traoré revealed will only make things worse. We need a different plan." Chelsea sat silently, her hands shaking. For years she had seemed untouchable, but now she felt like a trapped bird. The voices around her grew louder, arguing, clashing, desperate to preserve a crumbling legacy. At last, she whispered, almost to herself, "What if he's right? What if the truth can no longer be hidden?" The room went still. None of her advisors had expected that admission. Far away in Burkina Faso, Traoré spent that night with his own people. He wasn't celebrating. Instead, he listened to farmers, teachers, and mothers, gathering their stories to carry forward. His fight was never about destroying a reputation. It was about restoring dignity. Two leaders, two worlds, and the clock moved toward the final reckoning. By the fifth day, the scandal had become unstoppable. Protests erupted in cities worldwide. Some demanded justice for Africa, while others rallied in defense of the Clinton name. The world stood divided, restless, and waiting. In Burkina Faso, thousands marched peacefully with candles, holding signs that read, "Truth has no price." Their chants echoed into the night, prayers interwoven with pride. In Washington, politicians scrambled, issuing cautious statements. Some distanced themselves from Chelsea. Others avoided the matter entirely. But the people were no longer satisfied with silence. They demanded answers. Through it all, Traoré remained calm. He appeared briefly on Burkina Faso state television, his tone steady. "This is not a battle between nations. This is a call for honesty, for the children who deserve schools, for the sick who deserve medicine, for every human life that cannot be bought with money." His words spread like wildfire across the internet, translated into dozens of languages within hours. And as the world listened, many understood this was no longer about $82 million. It was about something deeper, about truth, dignity, and the courage to speak when others remained silent. On the sixth day, the world seemed to hold its breath. Chelsea Clinton finally agreed to address the public. Cameras lined the streets, crowds pressed against barricades, and millions tuned in to live streams. She stepped up to the podium, her face pale, her eyes heavy with sleeplessness. Her voice shook as she began. "For many years, I have tried to protect my family's name." Truths, gasps spread through the crowd. Advisors behind her shifted uneasily, but Chelsea continued. "If money meant for the vulnerable was lost under my watch, I cannot hide behind excuses. I cannot silence the cries of mothers and children." Her words stunned everyone. Though she didn't openly confess, her tone was no longer one of denial. It was a surrender to the weight of reality. Across the ocean in Ouagadougou, church bells rang as people gathered in prayer. Not because the scandal had ended, but because truth had finally broken through the walls of silence. In homes across the world, viewers wiped away tears. They realized this was bigger than one name. It was about justice, long denied. As the scandal reached its height, Traoré walked through the streets of Burkina Faso without a heavy entourage, only a few guards. People rushed to him, cheering his name, touching his hands, some even kneeling in gratitude. But he gently stopped them. "Do not kneel for me. Kneel only for God," he said softly, lifting an old woman back to her feet. Tears streamed down her face. "My son died because of lies," she whispered, "but tonight I can sleep knowing someone spoke for him." Traoré placed his hand on her shoulder, his eyes shining. "Your son's voice will never be forgotten." The moment was captured on camera and spread online within hours. It was no longer just a scandal. It became the image of a young African leader walking humbly with his people, carrying their suffering as if it were his own. Comment sections filled with messages. "This is true leadership. He gave us hope. May God protect him." As the sixth day ended, the world understood they were not just watching politics. They were witnessing the rise of a symbol of dignity. On the seventh day, the story reached its conclusion. Chelsea Clinton vanished from public view. Her legacy fractured. Investigations began. Debates raged, but the fire had already spread across the globe. Meanwhile, Ibrahim Traoré stood before a massive crowd in Burkina Faso's capital. The sun shone behind him as he spoke words that would echo through history. "This week has revealed one truth. Lies may build castles, but they collapse when the poor cry loudly enough. $82 million may vanish, but dignity must never be stolen. We will rise."